Okay, let's jump right into this deep dive. We're exploring a source today that speaks directly to a feeling, I think. Well, I think it resonates with a lot of people. That
Mm,
moment when you just feel completely drained, utterly worn down,
yeah.
and you start wondering, seriously, if you have anything left to keep going, like, can you actually keep putting one foot in front of the other?
That feeling is exactly where this source material kicks off, really.
Hmm.
It's a motivational script. The title is When You Feel Like Giving Up Yahweh, Not Done Yet.
Right, right.
And its whole structure is kind of built around addressing that very exhaustion
Hmm.
and then pointing towards, well, perseverance through faith.
Okay. So our mission here is to really unpack the core messages in this script.
Yeah.
What are the key ideas it's putting forward?
Mm.
What specific scriptural references does it lean on? And I guess, how does it actually propose you find the will, the strength to continue when you're facing real difficulty?
Yeah.
And just to note, we'll be using the specific terms for the divine from the source, Yahweh and Messiah Yahshua, as we explore its message.
Good point. And, the source doesn't really waste any time, does it?
No, it gets straight to it.
It immediately speaks to you, the listener,
Yeah.
sort of acknowledging that exact state, feeling tired, worn down, questioning if you can keep going. It puts the struggle right there, front and center.
It really does. It validates that weariness. But then what's really striking, I think, is the immediate pivot it makes.
Mm,
It counters that vulnerability with this really strong assertion. The source says, you're not alone. And more importantly, Yahweh is not done with you. Why is that specific counterpoint so critical? Right there at the beginning, after acknowledging the pain.
Well, I think it immediately shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from your limited personal capacity
Right.
and onto something external, something bigger,
Yeah.
divine presence, divine purpose, as the source sees it.
Okay.
By saying you're not alone, it tackles that isolation that struggle often brings.
Yeah, that's true.
And then by adding Yahweh is not done with you, it introduces this idea that your current feeling, like you're finished, that doesn't actually align with a larger ongoing divine plan for your life, according to the script.
Interesting. So that really sets the stage for the script's first big theme, which is confronting the, straightforward reality that, yes, life is hard sometimes.
Definitely. And it lists specific examples, really relatable ones, of the kinds of difficulties that can lead to this feeling of wanting to just quit.
Like what?
Things like experiencing a significant loss,
Mhm.
or facing those frustrating delays in life and your goals,
Mm-hmm.
or even going through what the source calls a season of silence from Yahweh,
A season of silence, meaning.
where you might feel, unheard or disconnected, like your prayers aren't getting through maybe.
Gotcha. And the source connects these hardships, these very real things, directly to the temptation to give up.
Exactly. It defines giving up in a few ways, like stopping belief, stopping trying, or even just stopping hoping. It highlights how struggle can really undermine your faith and your effort. But then, right after that, it lays down this foundational truth saying, quite unequivocally, Yahweh never gives up on you.
That specific phrase, Yahweh never gives up on you, it feels like an anchor.
It absolutely acts as a core anchor throughout the script's whole argument. It contrasts, human frailty and that desire to quit
Yeah.
with the source's view of divine steadfastness. It's really the bedrock premise that the rest of the message is built on.
Okay, so building on that bedrock, Yahweh's not done. Yahweh doesn't give up the source, then turns to scripture, right? To back up the idea that the divine work in your life is actually going somewhere.
Correct. It brings in the letter to the Philippians, chapter 1, verse 6.
How does the source quote that?
It quotes it as, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Messiah Yahshua.
Right. And the source then boils that down, simplifies it into this very memorable three-part statement.
Yeah, it does.
Uh-huh.
He began the work. He is continuing the work. He will finish the work.
Began, continuing, finished. What's the significance of breaking it down that way, especially for someone who feels totally stuck or like their story is just over?
Well, that specific phrasing really emphasizes continuity, doesn't it? And completion.
Yeah.
For someone feeling like everything has just stopped, or maybe they failed, or the work is just left undone, hearing, he began, he is continuing, he will finish,
Yeah.
directly counters that feeling of, like, finality.
Okay.
So the source uses this to tell the listener, quite directly, your story isn't over. You're not stuck, you're in process. It reframes this present moment, not as some kind of dead end, but just one phase in a longer, divinely orchestrated sequence that's moving towards completion.
So it pulls that big theological promise down into a very personal reassurance.
Exactly.
And then, okay, having addressed the promise of completion, the source tackles the practical question.
Right.
Where does the strength to stay in that process actually come from, especially when you feel totally wiped out?
Right, because that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is where it brings in Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 31.
Ah, a very well-known passage.
Hugely well known. The source quotes it. But they that wait upon the Yahweh shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint.
Beautiful words. But the source makes a really critical distinction here, doesn't it?
It does.
It
Crucial.
states very clearly, this isn't about your strength, it's about his. Why is making that distinction so vital to the source's message about perseverance?
Well, because the whole starting point, the whole premise, is that your strength is gone. Right.
You're depleted.
Exactly. So if the message was just, dig deeper, find your hidden reserves, it would honestly be pretty useless to someone who feels they've absolutely nothing left in the tank.
Good point.
By emphasizing that Yahweh is offering his power, his strength, his endurance, the source shifts the reliance completely. It suggests that the power to, run and not be weary, to walk and not faint, it comes from an external, inexhaustible source.
Okay. And how do you access that?
According to the verse, it's accessed through waiting upon Yahweh.
What does waiting upon Yahweh seem to mean in the context of this source? Is it just passive waiting, sitting around, or something more active?
Well, based on how the source frames it right alongside the call to not quit, to keep taking steps, it seems less about passive waiting and more about active trust, active reliance. It's waiting with expectation, maybe, anchoring yourself to the promise that his strength is available.
Instead of trying to muster your own.
Precisely. Rather than trying to generate your own power, which you don't have anyway, it's about leaning into that external power source described in Isaiah.
Okay. So bringing these different threads together, then the reality of struggle, the promise of divine completion from Philippians, and this source of external strength from Isaiah. The script then sort of condenses its message, right, into three core truths.
Yes, exactly. Three core truths it urges the listener to really hold on to.
Yeah.
Like anchors.
And what are they?
They're presented very clearly. You are not forgotten, your struggle is not wasted, and your future is not over.
That second one, your struggle is not wasted. That feels particularly powerful. How does the source expand on that?
It does expand on it. It suggests that Yahweh sees everything, every tear, every battle, every quiet moment.
Wow.
And is actively weaving it into a bigger picture. That's the imagery he needs.
Weaving it. What does holding on to that idea that your pain, your difficulty, it isn't pointless, it's being woven into something, what does that do for someone who's right in the middle of it, according to the source?
Well, it offers a framework for finding meaning, I think, even in the suffering. Instead of seeing struggle as just a sign of failure or maybe abandonment, this source proposes it's actually like raw material being used by Yahweh.
Raw material for
this bigger picture. The idea of weaving suggests, intentionality, purpose, even if you, the person struggling, can't see the pattern yet.
Right.
It shifts the perspective, potentially, from why is this awful thing happening to me, to maybe something like, okay, how is this being used? It suggests the struggle, while incredibly painful, is contributing to something larger and ultimately good, guided by Yahweh's hand.
That's a significant reframing. And it's from these truths, then, that the source issues its direct call to action for the listener who feels like giving up.
Yes, and it's incredibly practical, very immediate. The call isn't some huge, overwhelming demand like, find all your strengths right now.
Yeah.
No, it's simply, don't quit, take one more step, pray one more prayer, hold on one more day.
Breaking down that big command, don't quit, those micro actions, just one more step, one more prayer, that makes it seem much more achievable, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It acknowledges the depleted state the listener is in and offers these tangible small actions.
Yeah.
Actions that rely on that offered strength we talked about from Isaiah, not solely on their own empty reserves. It's about maintaining momentum through reliance, not trying to summon some superhuman willpower you don't have.
Got it.
And it circles right back, grounding this call to action in that concluding statement for the section. Because Yahweh not done yet, that promise is positioned as the fuel for taking that very next step.
Okay. And then the source wraps up, you said, with a prayer.
Yes, it concludes with a prayer that really echoes all the themes we've just discussed.
Like asking for renewed strength.
Asking for renewed strength,
Yeah.
yes. Trusting that Yahweh is still active, even during those difficult silent seasons.
Uh-huh.
And basically committing every part of their story, including their really hard chapters, into Yahweh's hands.
So it really reinforces the main takeaways from the source material we've been unpacking.
It does. It underlines the validation of feeling overwhelmed. 8, the profound reassurance from that Philippians passage that a divine work is in process. It is heading towards completion.
Mm-hmm.
And that crucial distinction made in Isaiah that the strength you need to continue is his, not yours. It leaves you with the source's core perspective. Even when you feel like your story is over, from this viewpoint, it's actually still unfolding.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with this final thought perhaps drawn from our deep dive into the source material. Consider that specific idea put forward here, that your struggle is not wasted, that Yahweh is actively weaving it into a bigger picture. How might intentionally holding on to that specific idea, the idea that the hardship you're facing has purpose within a larger unseen divine plan, according to this source's perspective, how might that potentially change your perspective or even your approach to facing difficulty today?
It's a powerful thought. And this source ultimately reminds us that from its perspective, you are not alone, and your story is indeed still being written.